Moving books within a library, especially with the intention of restricting access or hiding specific content, is a form of censorship that we must vigorously oppose. Censorship, by way of relocating books, undermines the professional standards of librarianship and erodes the trust that the community places in these dedicated professionals. Censorship and the interference in the selection of library materials can lead to the suppression of ideas, viewpoints, and voices. Such interference infringes upon the core principles of intellectual freedom and the First Amendment, which are foundational to democratic societies. It sets a dangerous precedent where a select few individuals or groups can impose their beliefs and ideologies on the entire community. In conclusion, the role of librarians in curating books is pivotal in upholding the principles of intellectual freedom, fostering diverse perspectives, and providing a reliable source of knowledge. It is our collective responsibility to support and protect the freedom to read by allowing librarians the autonomy to curate books without interference, thereby ensuring that our libraries continue to be bastions of democracy, enlightenment, and empowerment for all citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
John L. Raines. John L. Raines.
The U.S. Supreme Court established the test to determine whether matter is obscene. The three-pronged Miller test is as follows: whether the average person applying contemporary adult community standards finds that the matter, taken as whole, appeals to having or encouraging an excessive interest in sexual matters. Number two, whether the average person applying contemporary adult community standards finds that the matter depicts or describes sexual conduct in a patently offensive way. And three, whether a reasonable person finds that the matter taken as whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Last month, at the October Pickens County Council meeting, several people spoke and accused others of being book banners and Nazis. I want to set the record straight. This issue is not a political issue. This is an issue of law breaking, where underage children are being groomed to be hypersexualized with obscene material. If you or I checked out one of these highly pornographic verbiage books and gave it to our niece or our nephew to read, we could be legally charged with distribution of obscenity. This should also be a crime for libraries and schools. A librarian should be a curator. Curating books means to select the best or most appropriate, especially for presentation, distribution, or publication. Curating books for impressionable, innocent, underage children whose brains are not fully developed is not banning. Children should not be exposed to obscene, perverted material because it's unlawful. Anyone who is for supporting the idea that children should be allowed access to obscenity is a pervert, in my humble opinion. Most parents who speak out at public meetings reading excerpts from these books are told to stop reading it aloud because it's vulgar and obscene. But yet our library and our schools are allowing underage children to have access to this obscene literature. At present, I have found several books available in our public library which are obscene. Someone has allowed the purchase or donation of these sexual grooming materials to be available with little to no oversight. Why is our library director not properly curating books and blatantly allowing the purchase and or donation of obscene literature? This council, who has oversight of the library, needs to find out why. And I gave all of you an excerpt from 2 different books, and you should read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Peter Page.
If y'all need a copy of this, I've got copies for all y'all. I want to thank you for the opportunity. It's the first time I've been here. So I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. Now, this is not a comment about banning books. It is about taxpayer-funded distribution of pornography in Pickens County public libraries. According to the South Carolina Code of Laws, Title 16, Chapter 15, it is unlawful for any person knowingly to disseminate obscenity. Any material is obscene if it depicts or describes a patently offensive way sexual conduct, which is defined as follows: an act or condition that depicts actual or simulated touching, caressing, or fondling of, or other similar physical contact with the covered or exposed genitals, pubic or anal regions, either alone or between humans, or the same or opposite sex in an act of actual or apparent sexual stimulation or gratification. This is South Carolina law. From the book in our Pickens County Library entitled All Boys Aren't Blue by George Johnson, this is a biography. I've tried to find the calmest quote to put in here. Y'all need to read this book. This section of the biography describes a man giving another man oral sex. The victim goes on to say, and I quote, he did not know I was a virgin. I did my best to act dominant like my favorite porn star. This text describes sexual manipulation and abuse of a minor. Now, this is not sex education. This is pornography. From the book in our Pickens County Library entitled The Bluest Eye by Toni Morris. Now, this is fictional. On page 162, and I quote, a bolt of desire ran down his genitals, giving its length and stiffness in the lips of his anus. Surrounding all of this lust was a border of politeness. He wanted to, and I'll let you fill the word in, her tenderly, but the tenderness would not hold, and her vagina was more than he could bear. Both of these books explain, and this is the best parts I could find that I could possibly say in front of y'all. I'm embarrassed to even mention it, but yet people want opportunities for elementary students and junior high students to read this stuff. And it's in our libraries now. Specifically, I think it's Pickens and Easley. I'm not sure about Pickens, but I know it's in Easley. Both of these books are currently available in Pickens County Libraries. Article 5 of the Bill of Rights, Article 5 of the Library Bill of Rights.
Thank you, sir. That's 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. If we investigate and find out that this is pornography, who's responsible for putting these books in?
That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Luke Campbell.
So good evening. Here we have another time of public input. I'm sure it's not at the top of your list of things to do at a council meeting, but know this. Words spoken here have much farther reach than the six of you, and that's why we have public input. So in our last episode, again tonight, several people spoke out on banning books and intellectual freedom. And you know, it'd really be nice in America if we could talk about compromise on subjects like where a crosswalk should go on Main Street, or a compromise on how much development on Route 11. But the inputs last month, my input tonight, they're not that. It's not tit for tat, and truth has to be spoken. The stuff last month was foundational. It's about right and wrong. And the issue is, who makes right and wrong? Last month, the people speaking told you clearly that man defines what is right and wrong, and you are wrong if you do not support intellectual freedom, or if you take up the banning of books. But all these are a ruse. They are specters. Not once did anyone speak of what it was that was keeping them from the required intellectual freedom. Some of that was just mentioned tonight. What is this stuff? It's pornography, it's smut, it's degenerate lifestyles, it's the increase and expansion of racism, bigotry, and hatred. Those are the subjects for which intellectual freedom is required. The tactic was to ignore subjects and shame you. Evil was being promoted, and if you don't agree, you're doing wrong. Notice the process it's used all the time. First, it shows up as an annoying background. Then we tolerate it. Then we compromise to accept more and more parts of it. Then it's promoted. Then it's embraced, and then it's celebrated. Inappropriateness is what is being supported and fostered in last month's episode, and you are to do what you can to continue to compromise so that eventually evil will be celebrated. So for those listening, there's only one question. Do you support man or do you support God? The stuff that's being required in the libraries and schools cannot be compromised. This is not a discussion about a crosswalk on Main Street. It's a discussion of keeping evil and wrong out of the hands of kids and the public square. We all know that mutilating our bodies is wrong, so why would a degenerate lifestyle such as transgenderism be supported in any way? No one goes around saying it's a good idea to cuff your fingers or your toes, your hands, your nose, so why might mutilation through surgery or drugs be supported in any way? Evil is very cunning. Never mentioned the actual thing that's happening. Last month you were told that the subterfuge of intellectual freedom not to ban books, and again this evening. Removing God is at the center of all this stuff. For evil not to flourish, you must be foundationally secure with God, who is truth, and be at least as bold as those last month who require you to support wrong. In thousands of years, whenever morality is removed, nations decline and then vanish. There are no exceptions to that. That's where we are again today. There is no compromise here. Thanks for listening.
David Hall.
All right. I've listened to a number of these conversations, and frankly, I don't understand why we are discussing them here. I did a deep dive here, and I've talked to a couple of you privately as far as a question that I've had, and that is that who's running the library? Well, I dug. Pursuant to South Carolina Code 1976, and then a couple of those little squiggly marks, I don't know what they mean. 4-9-35 through 4-9-39, which defines how the library system is continued, in effect. It then goes on to, it references cross sections. I'm not going to bother with that. But I'm going to tell you, I can list a number of responsibilities and duties that the Library of Pickens County is supposed to provide. Every one of those duties points to the board. The library executive is mentioned one time, and one time only. Under the powers of the board shall employ a chief librarian whose qualifications and credentials shall meet the certification requirements of the State Library Board. And that, my friends, is the only thing that the code talks about as far as the library is concerned. In my opinion, trying to legislate this, trying to get some kind of consensus out of this is impossible. But you have clearly set out the way that that library is to be set up. The power is granted to the board, not to the chief librarian. Everything that I hear, everything that I see, points the opposite direction. That basically the librarian is free to come and go about. She challenges the fact, and I believe, this is secondhand, I don't know if it's true, but has basically told people that she does not work for the board, she works for you. So if that's the case, she's got the best of worlds. She can do whatever she wants to do with public money, with absolutely no accountability and no supervision. And that I put on you, shame on you, you've allowed this to happen. So what I would request you to do is please get in touch, have a meeting. I know you've got some new appointees coming on board. I would really like to see you guys have a meeting with the library board and the executive director and try and get this clarification done. There are references here as far as county appropriate material. I won't go and try and define that, but obviously what you're hearing is a real difference in opinion about that what is, and it should be left up to the people in the board's input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alex Steen.
Good evening. I know I'm late to the party here on the library issue, but I felt I should weigh in. I'm concerned about what I've seen online about calls to regulate the library. Many people spoke last time from like the left side of things, but as someone who tends to lean right on most issues, I feel like I should speak up because I think a lot of people are afraid to cross like the picket line of the traditional narrative. I understand completely why my fellow conservatives are upset about stuff in national news about activist or overtly sexual material being presented to kids in schools or as part of the curriculum, but I'm concerned about calls to regulate the public library. The public library is a resource for all ages, and while it might be a lot of things, it is not a daycare. They don't have the responsibility or the ability to supervise kids in their facility. And I've seen calls for legislation holding library staff responsible for minors accessing indecent material, but since they don't have the resources to supervise other people's kids when they come in there, the only way to comply with such legislation would be to remove anything that is potentially offensive. And I don't think people understand just how far that would go. There's a lot of heterosexual romance novels that would not pass the litmus test for sexual content. And although that's not my cup of tea, I know it's in there. I don't think you suppress bad ideas in society by banning their discussion. And let's be real, teens today have a lot of ways of finding indecent material. I think the library is probably their last choice in seeking out sexual material. I mean, I think this is probably a good choice. So anyways, I completely understand school libraries, I get that. But as far as the public library goes, I think we should let them do their job without political meddling. Thank you.
Pam Schaefer.
Thank you for hearing my opinion tonight, gentlemen and lady. I never thought I would have to come to my county council and complain about the fact that my tax-supported library is not only purchasing books that promote pornographic literature being available to them to read, but also they're supporting and enticing children through supporting demonic events that aid and abet the encouragement of children to become a furry. Let's be clear. No one is banning books or events for adults. We are curating what underage children are being exposed to that, quite frankly, is alarming, given the fact that a child's brain is not even fully developed yet to be exposed to such confusing issues. The library states its mission is to provide all county residents with appropriate information through the development of appropriate collection and services. My question is just who is making the decisions as to what is or isn't appropriate for underage children? It's obvious that our tax dollars are being used to purchase whatever the unelected library director deems appropriate. I ask you, is this the best practices? Recently on library Facebook page, they're enticing children to come to the Sorin Library in Liberty on November the 8th to dive into the Fruits Basket, which is a series about a troubled orphan girl who makes some equally troubled friends who are possessed by the Chinese zodiac and are cursed to turn into animals if they embrace anyone of the opposite sex. Can no one see the hidden dangers in this series? Is there no discernment on how children doing a deep dive into this series could trigger and aid and abet underage children into the demonic world, the satanic worship? We already are seeing children identifying as animals in our schools. They're called furries. Why is our public library encouraging this type of mental confusion in children whose brains are not fully developed? I am not for banning, I am not for library curating what they choose and don't choose to push on children. There's no law stating our library has to purchase all books and series that are published. Someone needs to be using better discernment in what is appropriate for underage children and what is not appropriate. This county council and the appointees you appoint to serve on the library board should be doing a much better job with their oversight of what is going on in our public libraries, or you too are guilty of harming our children's emotional health. Thank you.
Bill Kinney.
Good evening, council. My name is Bill McKinney. I live in Easley, outside of the city limits, close to Greenville. We have been discussing the UDSO for quite a while now, the better part of a year. And when we began, public comments were encouraged by the Planning Commission, and we had several public meetings. But I know that a semifinal document has been produced. I've yet to see it, nor has any of the public seen it. Originally, we were given QR codes where we could see some of the proposed change, and following that link, it seems to have not been updated since sometime this summer. The only updates I have heard recently discussed at the committee of the whole meetings were regarding open space, other than ones that dealt with tiny homes and RVs, but that's not really my focus area. But as far as large subdivisions, going to 40 or 50% open space has been something that's been put out there quite regularly. My concern is if we don't try to incorporate that space in some particular way, such as areas around entire developments or interspersal larger lot sizes, that what we'll end up with is in the future, a council will look at a metric whereby they'll see very dense housing, open space, more dense housing, and say, hey, all of this is already dense, let's fill in the gap with more dense housing. And that's not what we would like to see happen. I think a better protection against that is larger lot sizes or larger setbacks of properties on properties from roads, from neighbors, riparian buffers that are bigger between creeks and waterways, and things of that nature. Since we haven't seen the proposed changes ahead of the discussion tonight, I'm not able to comment on what may or may not be there, but I am curious to hear the discussion later. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of council, this concludes the public forum.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item up on tonight's agenda is the approval of minutes. I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes from October 2nd and October 16th.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Saylor.
when you actually read the minutes, they're titled October 6, 2023. It needs to be fixed. That's a Friday. So I'm going to make a substitute motion that the minutes actually for October 2nd, but the actual written minutes get corrected so they also read October 2nd.
I'll second that. Discussion on that.
You agree with that?
It's the correct date.
Any discussion on that? Being a substantive motion, that covers the first motion, if I remember my parliamentary rules correctly. Any other discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor as amended, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. Next item on tonight's agenda is the administrator's report. Mr. Roper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about a few things going on with the staff and with the county as a whole that we're excited to share with you. The first thing before I get, and if I get too deep into my comments here over the next few minutes, I'll forget. I want to make sure that the folks that have come tonight, regardless of your view one side or the other, on the library and the materials that may or may not be available in the library, I do want to make sure that everyone understands that there is a process in place for people to raise these concerns. The process is, I printed out 10 of these in case anybody might want one. That process would be that you put the item, the material, the movie, the book that you think is not appropriate for the library. You fill out the information in the form, you submit it to any of the library branches, and if you do that, then the librarian will review that to see if the material is appropriate for the library. And if you don't agree with the library's decision, that is then appealed to the library board. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that that process exists, because I know that several people here have talked about their frustrations, and they're coming to you to ask you to do something. And I want to make sure everybody understands that there is a process in place that the librarians will help you if you think a piece of material that they have available is inappropriate. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that, and I've got these copies up front if anybody would like them. Moving on to things that are more in keeping with the goals of council, you'll see we start many of our meetings here in the county with staff talking about goals of council. We were referencing them this morning on our staff call, how we can try to implement and actualize the vision that county council has set for us, and I want to update you on a few of those tonight. The first is, in terms of the goal you've given us to try to use every tool available to help our natural environment. We had a multi-department litter cleanup. If you ask Duke Energy, if you ask the Friends of Lake Kiowee Society, if you ask recreational boaters in and around Warpath Landing, they'll tell you that the trash at Warpath is a huge issue. I know that some of you have given me feedback about Warpath, and is there something the county could do? It's not a county-maintained facility. It's under the jurisdiction of the sheriff's office like anything else. It's a Duke-maintained facility at this time, but however, we did have a multi-department litter cleanup out there. 700 pounds of trash were taken from Warpath Landing in the area. 700 pounds. It's a little amazing, but it was environmental enforcement working together with our Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, as well as our emergency services. They provided the rescue boats so that we could actually get some of that trash out efficiently. But the multi-department litter cleanup, we're going to try to do more and more of these sorts of things. I'm very proud of our guys with environmental enforcement and our PRT folks for working on these sorts of things and cleaning that up. More proposals to come about how we might could help alleviate that in, we hope, the near future. One of the goals council gave staff this year was to come up with new metrics, new ways of measuring problems so that we could respond. And you may have noticed at your recycling center, you see in the upper right-hand corner there, that much of our signage at the recycling centers now has a QR code where you can point your phone at that and take a picture, and it will direct you to a website that gives you more specific information. That sign just says cardboard, please remove all items and breakdown. Whether or not breakdown should be 2 words, I'm not sure. I'm looking at the folks that might know that. But anyway, that's very good information. But that QR code then also gives you more specific information, and it allows us to change information on the website as market conditions might dictate that some type of recycling is better than others. But the interesting metric for us is what QR codes are getting scanned the most. And you'll see just in a few months of doing this that not many people are scanning QR codes for tires or really cardboard or aluminum. Most of the scans are coming from people having questions about e-waste, about metal, and about brown goods. So when we're looking at our education component in the coming months, we can use this data to say, okay, this is where most of our questions seem to be coming from. I just wanted to encourage people to use those QR codes and know that we can't tell any individualized data about you. For example, if you every day went and took a picture of the tires QR code, we couldn't call you up and say, hey, stop doing that. We're not keeping individual information, but it does, we can tell how many hits the websites get. So wanted you to know about that tool and how we intend to use it. I think it's a new metric that's going to give us good service. Speaking of recycling and recycling challenges, one of our biggest challenge now, and Director Steve Raines is here in the crowd with me, he's been talking to me about this for several months now, is that the market for recycled glass has collapsed. We're really having a difficult time recycling glass. Many counties, many municipalities have stopped altogether recycling glass, and when they can't recycle it, they just landfill it. Well, we still have the capacity to recycle glass. We still make the effort to recycle glass, but we fear that it's not sustainable. And so in that regard, before we just stopped it, we wanted to give you, the public, the opportunity to think about what might be the next big idea. So we're having a glass upcycling contest. Basically, the way the contest works is if you've got an idea, a sustainable idea, a marketable idea, some way that we can reuse glass or discourage the use of glass in favor of other recyclable materials like aluminum, we want to hear from you. If you'll go to, and I am going to take a time out to point this out to you, if you go to pickenscountysc.com or pickenscountysc.gov, either of them will take you to the county website now, which that's new just in the last few days. Thank you for authorizing that expenditure. That process through our IT department is ahead of schedule, and so we're getting away from the archaic old web address that we used to have. But if you go to pickenscountysc.com, you can see contest eligibilities, rules, and other details. If you win our glass upcycling contest, which we intend to announce at next month's council meeting, you win a weekend stay, all expenses paid at Mile Creek Park for the cabins there. Supply your own food, supply your own entertainment, but the cabin will be, that will be paid. So please participate in that. It's good for church groups, for school groups, for individuals, whoever might want to participate in Pickens County's glass upcycling contest. We hope that people will be able to give us ideas, and we can put your ideas out there to help us when we're in this situation where we're good stewards of our natural environment and our recyclable materials. Another feature that's been added to the fixingcountyroads.com website, and for those of you that may not know, if you go to fixingcountyroads.com, you can take a picture of a pothole or road condition that may be troubling you. It'll be geolocated. You can send that in through that portal on your mobile phone, and we will get a report the next morning. Our goal is to try to have that issue, if we can, fixed within the next few days. So go to fixingcountyroads.com to do that. But some of the frustration that we've gotten from folks is they'll go to report a problem and it'll be a city street or a state highway. And we don't want to be the type of public servant that just says, that's not my problem, go talk to somebody else. So what we've added is a feature to fixingcountyroads.com that, to our best estimation, to our best knowledge, if you click on a road that's not a county road, it gives you the contact information of who you need to contact. So we're not just leaving you out there. If it's a state highway, it gives you the state highway office. If it's a Clemson City Street, which are appropriately colored orange down there, you'll see, it'll give you the contacts for their roads folks. And so we're hoping that'll be helpful to people so they don't feel like they're having to hunt who the proper person is to report a road issue. One of the things I want to thank you all for, and staff wants to thank council for, is a few months back you allocated some money to apply to our museum. Our museum needed some repairs. It needed some freshening up, and it needed some areas made more suitable for use. Those repairs have been done, and we can report that, just as we'd hoped would happen, the use of the museum has really skyrocketed. Through the end of October, through the first 10 months of this year, we have had over 5,000 visitors to the museum, which is more than 2022 and 2021 combined. So basically, we feel like the investment that council's made is paying off in dividends. I'm aware of a couple of business entities that have had their retreats there now, or are planning to have their retreats there. Social civic organizations can meet there. And then there's just good displays all throughout. Right now, as a matter of fact, any member of the public can go and view the juried arts competition now between, it started a couple weeks back, but it goes through December the 9th, and you can vote for your favorite piece of artwork that's entered into the competition. So please go to our museum and participate. Where we are right now, we're actually fixing the entranceway. So if you come up to an entranceway to the museum, it's the back entranceway right now. It's blocked off. Come around the street to Johnson Street. You can drive on in the front entrance. And then here in a couple of weeks, those will flip-flop. So don't be afraid to drive around the block, but good things going on at our museum. As it's already been referenced tonight, on the agenda later is coming up conversations on the UDSO. I want to go back through some of the things we've done to continue this conversation in public. I think this has gone on now from going back to March, but then over the summer, council gave very specific instruction that you wanted more public involvement in this process. And so we've endeavored to do that as a staff, including doing a Facebook Live from the Public Service Commission, a live UDSO webinar that happened a couple of Mondays back. We had our 183 upgrade press conference, and then there was a media availability after that about the UDSO. The panel discussion that we had set for last Wednesday has been postponed due to weather. So look for that postponed date. There was a Facebook Live on housing last Friday, and then there'll be another webinar, which I anticipate will be used to update the public on the documents for second reading and discuss what the specific proposals in the second reading. I know during public comment, someone described second reading the document as, and I wrote this down, semi-final. And I want to assure everyone nothing could be further from the truth. This is really the starting point of the actual written language. So assuming the county council is able to give us second reading tonight, which is in their discretion, that will be the starting point for actual language. There'll then be, I assume, Mr. Chairman, many hours of work still to go refining that language until ultimately this document is ready for a third reading. But in the meantime, we're going to continue with our public comments and public discussions about this. So look for that webinar on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Contact our office if you need help figuring out how to log on to that webinar. We're going to talk about where we are in the process and what's in the proposals that council has reviewed. This is just a running list we're keeping of the committee of the whole discussions, the council work sessions, the planning commission meetings, the public hearings, the UDSO public meetings, the various meetings that we're having to make sure that we're getting the public input so that you all will be informed as you make this difficult balance. So we're going to continue with that list, and you'll see how many times up to now you've discussed it. And from a staff standpoint, this has been very rewarding to have a county council willing to work this hard on this issue as we get now to actually putting pen to paper and having specific language to begin to work on. I think this is a very, very exciting time. Mr. Chairman, members of council, that's all I have prepared, but I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Roper?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Sarah.
what's the status of the two EMS power trucks?
The two EMS power trucks, I don't have the,
Are they fully staffed and running?
they are not, they are fully running, but there will be some times when we don't have the 12-hour staff members on there. I know one of them, if I'm recalling correctly, we have one 12-hour paramedic and two 12-hour EMT slots still to fill, but we have one of those trucks running all the time, fully staffed. The other one's, I guess, staffed 2/3 of the time.
Which one is fully staffed? Is that the one out of Central?
It's going to be, that's going to vary. That's going to vary.
So you're saying one's fully staffed, usually running all the time, the other one's 2/3 staffed?
Yes, sir.
Now, I got a question about the MRR settlement. Okay. One aspect of that settlement was that MRR was required to construct the landfill on the 148 acres and get it open for business. If they didn't do that in a timely manner, they then would have to pay the county $10,000 a month in penalties, and that fine would grow $10,000 per month. So has MRR started construction on the landfill?
They have.
And what was the date of the start? Do you remember?
I don't have that date in front of me. We can get that information back to you.
Yeah, because if they don't complete that within a year, that phase one, that's when those fines start, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, after the landfill's opening day, which you're gonna let me know what it is, MRR then has 3 years to sell that landfill or pay us staggering fines if they don't?
Yes, sir.
Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so after a year, so let's see, so let's say the opening day was 2 weeks ago. 3 years from that day, if they haven't sold it, they will owe us $500,000.
I don't remember the specific dollar amount, but that sounds right.
Okay. All right, I want to just, and how far along are they as far as?
I don't have, the last time I was out there was about 2 weeks ago, and I know they were working on the entranceway, but until that's done, I haven't been back there to look.
As part of the settlement, we were actually giving them money, lending them money for that construction.
That's correct.
Have we done that?
Yes, we did. I believe we did that at the settlement time.
So it was, okay. All right, that's good, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Roper?
Mr. A comment was received today about communicating with the public about the UDSO. I know, especially after today's meeting, we're going to get a lot of questions. Your events have been fantastic, but they have been mainly accessible for people on Facebook. Can you make sure that those are please added to the events calendar that's on the county page? Because they're not reflected there now, the October and November ones.
Right.
I don't see on the events calendar, so that's on the planning page.
That's a good idea. Thank you for that. We would.
And then the last update there was about county council meetings being in October, and there's conversation about stuff in July. So if I could just please ask staff to make sure that the UDSO update website on the planning page is kept as updated as Facebook is. Okay. So it's just in one other place.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Wallace.
Back to the library complaint form. How does that process work?
So the form is available at any of the branches. You put your name, your address, contact information, and then it's a checklist where you say what are you commenting on: an audio recording, a display, an ebook, a library program. I know someone mentioned a program, a website, or a book, and then you list it and you ask, I think it's 6 questions to try to glean what your concern is, and then you sign it, date it, turn it into any library branch. It doesn't have to be the one you got the form from, and then it goes to the library director to review the material to see if the library director agrees with your complaint. If so, then the item would be removed, or you could use this if you wanted something, you know, you need to make you need to put Dr. Seuss more out front or something. You know, you could do it in a positive way as well. But if you don't agree with that decision, the appeal right under the procedure that the library board has established is from the director then to the full library board. In the past year or so, I've been fortunate to have been present while one of those appeals went on, and so I know they actively do that, but that's the way it works.
So it goes through the librarian first.
Yes. And then to the library board.
Satisfaction's not gotten then it moves to the board plus the librarian.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Roper? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the committee report. The Committee of the Whole met on October 16th. Log number 222, Animal Control Ordinance, no action was taken by the committee. Log number 141, which is the UDSO. The following motions were made regarding second reading of the UDSO ordinance. Vice Chairman made a motion to limit conventional subdivisions to 10 lots countywide. The motion was seconded by Councilwoman Linville and carried unanimously 6-0. Chairman Bowers made a motion to include an impact fee chart in the UDSO once the study was completed, and council approves of it. The motion was seconded by Councilman Wilson and carried 5-1 with Councilman Seda opposed. Chairman Bowers made a motion to update the open space subdivision with the density dictated by the land use map area. Motion was seconded by Councilman Wilson. Chairman Bowers amended the motion, stated it would be tied to areas subject to setbacks and specific limitations of the property. Motion was seconded by Councilman Wilson. The motion carried 5-1 with Councilman Seda opposed. Councilwoman Linville made a motion to update UDSO with RV as a dwelling unit. The motion was seconded by Chairman Bowers. Motion carried 4-2 with Councilman Seda and Lawless opposed. Councilwoman Claiborne Linville made a motion that the minimal acreage of an RV park or campground be changed from a minimum of 2 acres to a minimum of 5 acres. Motion was seconded by Councilman Wilson. Councilman Wilson made an amended motion stating, subject to the approval of the zone areas, he would like to limit RV parks to a minimum of 5 acres in all zones and a maximum of 10 acres in 3 heritage zones, pending approval of the map. Motion was seconded by Councilman Costner. The motion was carried 6-0. Councilman Wilson made a motion to approve the developmental area map and apply it as a guideline for all discussion council will be having about the locations of development activities. Motion was seconded by Councilwoman Linville and carried 5-1 with Councilman Seda opposed. Councilwoman Linville made a motion to approve all parking spaces in excess of 110% of the minimum required parking shall be installed as a pervious surface with a material or technique approved by the Pickens County Stormwater Department. The motion was seconded by myself. The motion carried 5-1 with Councilman Seda opposed. Chairman Bowers made a motion to fix the general grammatical and title updates. The motion was seconded by the Vice Chairman and carried unanimously. Vice Chairman Costner made a motion to move forward with the definition of a tiny home. Motion was seconded by Councilman Wilson and carried 5-1 with Councilman Seda opposed. Chairman Bowers made a motion to adopt the townhouse definition to the updated UDSO to match IBC standards in an attempt to provide more direction in the development of townhomes. Motion was seconded by Councilwoman Linville and carried 5-1 with Councilman Seda opposed. Chairman Bowers made a motion to adopt the traffic study policy. The motion was seconded by the Vice Chair and carried unanimously. Vice Chair Costner made a motion to adopt the amendment of the land use application to include developer responsibilities. The motion was seconded by myself and carried unanimously. Chairman Bowers made a motion to make updates to the stormwater ordinance. The motion was seconded by Councilman Wilson and carried 5-1 with Councilman Seda opposed. That was all of the updates to the UDSO coming out of the committee meeting. It doesn't need a motion as it does it doesn't require a second as it comes out of committee discussion. On log number 141, the UDSO.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman
are we gonna
Sim.
vote on all these as one?
This is what rolled out as one. That's what the document reflects. That's what log number 141 reflects. This was just the changes, amendments, things that took place following the committee log. for the committee meeting.
There's about 7 or 8 things on there, and some of them I voted for, and some of them I voted against, so I would like to vote on them separately and debate them separately, particularly for the public, because they've been given nothing, and this is the second reading. This needs to be debated publicly, item by item, in my opinion. So, I'm making a substitute motion to conquer these one vote at a time.
So I have a substantive motion that we, did you say conquer these?
Yeah, vote on them one at a time.
Vote on these items, one item at a time. Do I have a second?
Are we, question, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this vote to bring it out of committee?
It's out of committee. It came out of committee after the committee. It came out of committee, second reading of Unified Developmental Standard Ordinance. So what Councilman said, I believe, is requesting, what I'm asking for a second on, is taking log number 141, one item at a time.
Because that's how we voted for it.
I don't hear a second. Back to discussion on log number 141 as coming out of committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Say.
I've got a lot to say. I'll try to summarize this in 10 minutes. There should be a lot of votes that we're taking on this. Obviously, it's just going to be one big vote. And I'm going to tell you about the thoughts and principles that I'm using to guide my decisions on this. The primary concern is protecting the quality of life of the people who live here now, our constituents, not those who may move here next month or next year or 5 years from now. The people have yelled loud and clear to raise building restrictions across the county, to slow growth significantly, raise restrictions even more in the northern part of the county, to protect the natural beauty and the wildlife, and that's how I'm going to vote. This means putting a limit on size of subdivisions, raising minimum lot sizes and widths and setbacks. Then each new subdivision needs a thorough traffic and infrastructure study, water study, and to make sure that these houses and subdivisions are not built without necessary infrastructure. I will just tip the high points here. Impact fees. I'm not voting for those. We don't know if they're going to be charged per home, per apartment, per mobile home, tiny home, RV. What the impact fee is going to be, we don't know. And it's going to the second vote right now. We don't have wording on it. It's going to a second reading vote right now. I oppose impact fees for a few reasons. One is it's another tax, and natural revenue is growing quite strongly, and the county has oodles of savings. I think impact fees will give the county, incentivize the government to lower density standards and bend the edges of requirements in order to raise density and build more homes and collect the impact fee plus annual taxes. The people want less growth, not more. The council should not incentivize the government by giving them impact fees to approve more homes being built so they can collect more money. The goal is to keep housing affordable. Adding impact fees will just make those homes more expensive. This is going to make RVs permanent residents. So there's going to be so many unforeseen negative consequences of doing this. Your neighbor could buy a piece of land next door, put an RV on it, and live on it. And it'd be legal. Then you see him at Walmart in the house he lives in buying a gallon of milk. I don't think people want that in this county. At least they've told me that. These things are going to show up in people's backyards, rented out. Low cost, I understand affordability, but low cost is going to attract criminals, drug addicts, illegal migrants. They will put them in low-cost producers, landlords will put them all in one area. They'll be your slums in the future. People do not renovate RVs. They'll get broken down over time. The mobile home crisis of the 80s and 90s was exactly that. These things got broken down, stayed where they were. If you read the DSO now, it's very hard to put a mobile home up, especially a mobile home park. We learned that lesson. Making RVs a permanent resident is just going to open that up again. That's part of this. Tiny homes. They can be built as little as 400 square feet. They're cheap. When people realize they can't live in 400 or 500 square feet, their stuff's all over the front lawn. I've seen it. We don't have the code office to prevent it. Again, the low-cost landlords will come in, put these all in one places. Oh, it's for the working man. 15 years of working man won't want to drive there during the daytime. So I think we should put a minimum size on any dwelling of 1,000 square feet. Now, the cities want to do it, and they're doing it, and Easley has tiny homes, and it's working for them right now, that's fine. But countywide, I think it's just going to create the wrong incentive. Townhomes, when you actually look at the old standard, it was per acre. It was, let me see, per 10 acres, it was 40 units. The new standard's going to allow 48 units. So the standard is raising the density 20%. Like I said, I am going to vote against anything that raises density. Density needs to be lowered. Finally, the stormwater ordinance I agree with, but it's very vague, it's very broad. It requires a stormwater committee to hear appeals. It's been in effect since 2007, this ordinance. There isn't a stormwater committee. Doesn't seem like you get a place to appeal to. That, I would vote for the stormwater ordinance. I like it because it's stricter. But you have to have a robust appeal process, because if you're just appealing it back to the department, they're going to just tell you what they just told you. It's sad that this thing did not get debated thoroughly. I am voting against it for those reasons and more.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman.
Well, excuse me, the change in weather. One thing I do want to do is make an amendment that once we do this, that it immediately gets put back into the committee of the whole.
I have a motion on the table to recommit.
Yes.
To amend to recommit.
To amend to recommit.
Reading tonight. I have a second. I have a second by Ms. Linville. Conversation or discussion on the amendment to recommit following tonight's reading.
What does that change? Can you clarify what that would change?
Just automatically puts it back on the committee log.
Do we already not do that? Or this is.
But technically, it's out of committee, so it needs to be recommitted to be able to pick it back up in committee.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I support that, but tied up with all this other stuff, I'll be voting no.
Other discussion? So the motion on the table at this moment is to amend this second reading to include the verbiage that it will go back to committee following tonight's reading. No other discussion. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by raising your hand. That's unanimous. All right, back to discussion on the original motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman.
So, Councilman Zaid, I agree with you on everything that you're talking about as far as protecting the quality of life and the need to put in the restrictions on nearly everything that you're talking about. But we have the process that we do. I think we're being a little jaded if we say we're not talking about this in public. We openly debated this in committee of the whole for a very long time, and we've been openly debating this since February. So to say that we're all of a sudden at one point trying to just blindly put everything through and it's going to be automatically approved and that's that and this is what it is not true. Because when it goes back to the committee of the whole and we continue to debate it, you can make any motion you want to on any of those items. We can discuss it and we can make changes. We also have the opportunity now that it's written to talk to as many people as we can in our subsequent districts and go, what do you like, what do you not like? Because there's a lot of things I don't like about it. But to say that this is the final say-so at this point is just simply inaccurate. One of the things that I like about this process is that we now have a document, a god-awful document in hand, thank you, to the trees that you killed, to go through. And as Councilman Linville had pointed out earlier, I mean, there are things in here I haven't even got to yet because I have not read it cover to cover with all the new changes since we got it, but we'll begin to do so. So I just want to make the point clear to the rest of council that we're not blindly voting on something and now it is what it is. this begins further conversation and get into more of the specifics about what we want to try to accomplish.
Dr. Wilson.
I'm just looking at the notes here, and I was listening to Mr. Sada's comments about putting a size limit on tiny homes, but there's nowhere here where we had a vote on a motion by Mr. Sada to put a limit on tiny homes. So I do recall, and please folks go look at the videos, that we had what I felt like was a pretty robust debate. We were here throughout the evening, and I mean, there was a lot of opportunity for you to put a lot of things forward that would be on record, either in the minutes or on the video. In a lot of the cases, you were digging in your books. There's a difference to do it here in front of these folks, but when we had a very rigorous and robust debate, we're all there to work on a collaborative effort. I mean, is it just because of the audience that you're making those issues? Or is it because these folks are here and there's only like 3 people at that meeting? Because we've had nothing but an incredible debate. So I'd just like to better understand, because it may be that I commiserate with you, but honestly, it just feels like showmanship.
Henry, I've said this numerous times in debate, and your response to me was, we shouldn't put a limit on the size of people's houses. People didn't support it. Again, it's not that I didn't say it. People didn't. I can make a million motions if you want me to. They're not going to pass.
Could you clarify? During the highway, maybe this would be in the minutes, during the Highway 11 activities, certainly on a video, you took extreme exception to the idea that we would tell people to do anything about their home. Size limits, no, that was off the table. You took exception to the other side of this coin over and over and over again, but now that it meets some sort of political expediency for you in front of this group, not when we were actually having a debate about it, you're going to talk about this like it's some sort of a freedom of speech issue.
No, what I said in Highway 11 was 3 things. The public did not want any new commercial on Highway 11. The public did not want any new manufacturing on Highway 11. When it came to individual homes, they were half and half. Half of them didn't want any restrictions at all, and half of them wanted some restrictions, minimum lot sizes. They never talked about size of homes.
No, but so we did talk about things such as the type of lighting that you would need, like down lighting. We talked about lots of features associated with people's homes, pretty much similar to what a square footage limit would be. And you were categorically and publicly and recorded being opposed to those.
Sure.
So you didn't put forward a motion, and you've been against it in the past. So honestly, I'm just asking you, are you purposely inconsistent, or are you doing this for a reason?
No, we're talking about different things. We're talking about minimum square footage, and I've given you this reason 100 times, and I've seen it. When you allow people to live in houses as small as 400 square feet, they think it's great because they like the price tag. But when they actually go live in it, their stuff's going to end up all over the lawn. I've said that 100 times. Now, and your response to that was we shouldn't choose what people live in. Will you support that? 1,000 square foot minimum?
This is America.
Yes or no?
The minimum that you can
won't.
build a house through all the. He asked me a question.
I did. Yes or no?
Would I support a limit on it? No, I won't support a limit on it.
Right,
And the reason that
why
I won't
don't
support a
want
limit is for the same reason that at the time you said that you wouldn't support telling people what type of lighting they would have. People should be able to build what they want within the building codes, because we don't write the building codes. The International Building Code is not part of this body's efforts, right? It's outside of that. I think they told us that the minimum that you could build a house for and still meet all the codes was like 380 square feet, have a restroom and a kitchen and whatnot. There's your functional limit. But I mean, I thought that you were a finance guy. I'm a free market economist type of person. When it comes down to it, people can only build what they can sell. So if we're going to arbitrarily limit it, just like you didn't want to do almost a year ago, we're going to arbitrarily limit what people can do with respect to the size of their home, the style of their home, the color of their home, or anything like that. It's the building codes that should dictate those things. The standards associated with scientifically providing folks housing that's safe and commensurate with health standards and things like that, that's not part of what we're doing. So you just arbitrarily make up a number like 1,000, just like with 1,000 linear feet of space around US 1 or US 11.
Yeah.
When you arbitrarily make up a number like that, there's no grounding for it, it's just your opinion. But I'm just asking you, are you purposely being inconsistent in these types of requirements? Because honestly, if I were one of your constituents, I'd be confused. Are you for or against telling people what they can or can't do when they're going to build their home? So take a reasonable position on that. I'm for leaving it to people's own decisions because it's their money, their lives, their families, their land. That's what I'm going to support. So that's why I wouldn't vote on a limit like that.
Okay,
but I was just asking you a question. Are you being purposely inconsistent?
Let me finish, please, Councilman.
Are you being purposely inconsistent, right? Or have you just changed your
I think I'm
mind?
being very consistent on this aspect, which is,
Well,
and I gave you my reasons.
Gentlemen, please, one at a time.
The notion that we don't tell people what they can do with their property, it happens all the time. 500 pages right here. county government telling you what you can do with your land. This isn't the first time it's happened, Henry. Now, when people come to you loud and clear and screaming at you, and I've knocked the doors, I've done the surveys, I've done the mailers, that they want these controls. They want less density, they want less density up north. You need to listen to them, and I'm listening to them. We have struggles with homes that are small, where people put stuff on front lawns and people complain about it. I'm responding to that. Okay, that's a lot different than saying you have to have a green light bulb or a blue light bulb. That's not going to materially affect your neighbor. That stuff is. I mean, my final point is this. Hey, whatever I said was true. I've read this. I've read a 403 pages. I know it. They know it. I'm calling them with questions. What I just told you is the truth. And you're going to end up with tiny homes all over the county. You're going to end up with RVs, people living in them all over the county. It's not what the majority of the people want. Higher density in many places that people don't want. We haven't seen the density to the maps yet. We saw them, but now they've been pulled back for some reason. Now it's been changed. The public doesn't know what's going on. Honestly, I would not vote on this for second reading at all until the public gets a copy of the final thing we're going to do. That goes to second reading, that goes to third reading. This is changing so much that I'm surprised anybody's going to vote on it. And I think if we were given a quiz on this right now, most people would fail.
So, Dr. Wilson, can I ask you to yield the floor? Let me ask a question or make a statement.
Sure.
I do want to make a statement. I keep hearing repetitively, time and time again, final document, final document, final document, final document. And I understand the frustration, everybody in the room wanting to know what's in the document. I get that. The thing about a three-reading process is nothing is final until the vote on the third reading. If Councilman Sada wants to slide in and say, I'm going to make a motion for 1,000 feet, or I'm going to pull the votes and blah, 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 or Councilman Dr. Wilson were to say, I'm going to make the motion that tiny houses are no longer allowed, and that happens on third reading, that is the way this process works. I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm saying it's the way that it works. If you are expecting a good, clean document on second reading, it's not going to happen. It's not the design of the system. I didn't write the law that created it, but I have to work within the confines of that law. And the only way to get a good, clean document without doing what I've been accused of time and time again, and that is rubber stamping, is to have debate and discussion in the open like this, and you'll have a first reading, you'll have a second reading. It's not a perfect document. We knew when they delivered the 400 and whatever pages that it wasn't perfect. We knew when we left the committee meeting it wasn't perfect. But the only way we can get public input is for the public to hear it, which is the purpose of the second reading. If we wait until it is perfect, someone will come to you with something and say, we need to change this. And guess what? You've had third reading before they ever saw it the first time. That's the purpose of this process. So I want to be clear about that, because I have been accused too many times of rubber stamping something. This isn't rubber stamping. This isn't pushing down the throat. This is creating discussion and debate and being very open and being extremely transparent. Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Sure. So you had mentioned not talking to folks. I talked to lots of folks. I had an inordinate amount of meetings with folks to just talk about tiny houses. I don't want to live in a tiny house. I wouldn't want to rent one. And I wouldn't want to have to be a tenant of one. They're tiny, right? And I like John, right? I couldn't put 7 Jeeps in a tiny house yard. So when it comes down to it, 6 Jeeps and 2 diesel pickup trucks. So at the end of the day, folks asked us to do this. That's why we're having this conversation. Folks have asked us to make it illegal for folks to live in an RV for longer than 6 months. You can't park an RV in the same spot for longer than 6 months. They've asked us for that because sometimes it might take you 2 years to build a house if you're living in the RV. And Mr. Sainz not cited any kind of study or anything that automatically links folks building tiny houses to just throwing crap down in your yard. And the remarkable piece about it, I went around and looked at a bunch of neighborhoods where they have developments. And I did the little camera views you can do on the internet to look at people's stuff. Most of the tiny house developments I saw were fairly well set up because tiny houses are not cheap. They're like $400 a square foot. Think about how much you spend when you do $200 to $400 a square foot on an 800 square foot house. That's incredible. To be able to store all of people's junk, you gotta have all these little special nooks and crannies. It's a carpenter's dream, right? But it ain't cheap. And then the people in this community were asking for tiny houses weren't planning on building cheap. Matter of fact, their first 2 customers were like retired lawyers. They were hoping to downsize from McMansions, wherever it was they were coming here from. So It makes for good rhetoric, and it makes for good scare tactic and all that other stuff, right? But people are poor. They're poor. People are poor. And they have to have choices. And some of their choices probably aren't what I want to live in. I grew up on the Mill Hill and moved off the Mill Hill to a single wide trailer that was so tiny. I mean, honestly, to breathe, you had to ask somebody to get out of your way. I grew up in a trailer, and no, I wouldn't want to do that again. But lots of folks will have to in our community, particularly with a lot of the changes we're about to make. Housing's going to get more expensive, probably 20 to 25% more expensive. Those are the things you guys asked us to do. But if we don't have some outlet for folks that need more modestly costly income, I mean, when you get 22 out of school, or if you don't go to college, or you're 18, you want to move out of your parents' house, can you buy a $500,000 house in a neighborhood with 2 acres on it and 40% open space? Probably not. You're probably going to want to move into an area like a mobile home. Or you might have to move in your parents' backyard and live in an RV. Those are going to be options that are folks. Right now, we don't have standards for any of that. We're talking about adding those standards. We don't have the standards now. We're talking about adding some. And the thing is, Mr. Sadie could have already made a motion tonight for us to postpone this and have another community meeting. He could have already done that. He didn't. He grandstanded. Here's the deal. We got 3 readings. The second reading and the third reading is probably going to be a totally different package. And that's on y'all. Every one of y'all. To call every one of us. And tell us what you want to change. Because I could read this thing 5 times and not see that one little thing in there that's going to ruin neighborhoods. It's up to all of us to be able to do that. What he's talking about is another 3-hour session tonight of all of us bickering and debating between each other. One night, these guys, when I wasn't here, had a discussion about the difference between should and shall for 2 hours. So, if we do pass it tonight, and I'm not saying we will, you'll have the opportunity to look at it. We just got it. It's 400 pages. These guys had to write a 400-page book. Stephen King does 5 pages a day on a good day. They had to write this book. Y'all get a chance to look at it. Y'all are going to get to come to us and debate it. Then we will have a public session about it, and then we'll have a public meeting about it. None of this is final. You will be included like you've been included along the way. You'll have probably 19 times to see Ken on the Facebook talking about it. So at the end of the day, what I want to do is something that's consistent with what I've told people since the very beginning. I want to be sensitive to the fact that young people and poor people need to have the opportunity to buy housing, because housing is where you build wealth in America. And when you retire and you own a house, you have options for all the things that happen to you when you're retired. So I would prefer that we not quadruple the cost of housing in our community, particularly for lower cost housing. But if you talk to the realtors, and there's some guys here, a low cost house right now is $200,000. You know how much income you have to make to be able to afford payment in a 5% interest rate market on a $200,000 house? Way more than the average of the household incomes in our community already. So if you ask us to disenfranchise people from ever having the opportunity to own a home, which means ever having the opportunity to have the American dream of financial independence when you need it the most, when you're retired, when you're older, when you're building a family, or heck, just when you're 22 and you just want to get out of your mom and dad's house because your dad gets on your nerves. If you want us to be able to do that, we have to be kind of cognizant of the fact that people are going to need some diversity in their opportunities to go buy housing, and that's RVs, that's all sorts of other stuff. And when it comes down to it, we've limited the size of people, the areas people can put RVs. We're talking about limiting the size of tiny houses. We kept all of this stuff kind of constrained because we don't have the maps yet, right? And we know that we might have to make some updates in the future. And here's the worst part about this whole discussion that we're having, where he started out a second ago. In the very beginning, we all had the option, because it was put on the table, to go through these things and vote on piece after piece after piece, which would be an individual debate about each item. He didn't like it. So he wanted to vote against it. We could have went through this thing, and each one of these chapters could have been their own thing. Some of those chapters could have already been past the third reading. They're just so easy to do. Some of the stuff might be still stuck in the first reading because they're so complex. But instead, he wanted to have it in here in a big old chunk. And then he was complaining about the opposite. That's why I was asking him earlier, is it purposeful? Because it cuts against what we're hoping for, which is good government. So for my purposes, I would like for us to either pass it tonight or not pass it tonight and move on to the next session. But I would really, really enjoy if we could just trim back a little bit on the gamesmanship, because this is pretty important to most everybody here and everybody who live in our community. And so political points and grandstanding and all that aside, let's all at least be, for God's sakes, consistent. I don't want to hurt people that don't have a house. I want to push back on the rapid growth. All of the growth surprised everybody. This thing's not been updated in 20 years. I mean, it's terrible. So we're going to try to do good works for you folks. The good works don't have to come with a ballyhoo.
Vice Chair.
Yes, sir. Part of the frustration that people feel, part of the frustration that we feel, is in the process. Excuse me. I mean, use the veterans, since veterans is on our minds for this weekend. I mean, use this as an example. The process, if we were to do first reading in title only, because we were gonna build a new veterans facility, we would do a first reading in title only, meaning, hey, we're thinking about this is something we should look at. Then we get the information from staff, and in second reading, we would have all the paperwork of what that facility would look like. And then we would go back and debate that, and then go, well, we like this or we don't like that. And then in third reading, we either approve or disapprove that new facility for the veterans. The UDSO is massive and huge, and there's so many people that it affects in different ways, from tiny homes to large homes to big developments to open space and setbacks and impact fees and water, stormwater, sewage, all that stuff, all that matters. I'm saying that just so that we don't get lost in the process. First readings in title only, we're looking at this. Second reading, which has taken us a long time to get here because we've done a lot of discussion, is now we got something to talk about. Now we begin the process to get us towards the third reading and those continued discussions. That's just how this process of 3 readings works. The third reading is the final. So I hope that we can move forward.
Discussion on the ordinance. Ms. Linville.
I am pleased, this is 12 items that we're presenting for second reading. I'm pleased, as professionally, I'm a writer and a proofreader. I wanted to see the words that were coming. Second reading allowed us to get a version of it. Should we pass it, y'all can get a version of it. And I look forward to hearing people's feedback on those words. One thing that came up that may be of confusion to the public, because you haven't had a chance to see it, is that we are talking about density related to a map. That map, staff has gone through, I think, 20-something iterations of different maps that go through where density currently exists, where we might want it to exist, areas that touch municipalities versus areas that touch natural land. We are trying to figure out where density goes. And to be clear, our county's doubling in size in the next year. We are going to be the 11th largest county in this state. We're on track for that. Growth is coming here, and people need to own homes. I represent the Clemson area. You cannot buy a starter home in Clemson right now. You cannot. Our teachers, our nurses, our retail workers, our PhD students cannot afford to live in the city of Clemson right now. We have to have the ability to have some housing that's denser around our cities, which prevents sprawl. If you keep people who are using a city living next to the city, you don't have as much traffic problems, and you don't tax the environment as much, and you can leave protected areas more protected. You let the density be in the places where it's safer, where there's less sprawl, and where we already have the infrastructure, so that we can protect the areas that we know and love of Pickens County that are more natural. The people are going to come. Where do you want them? Do you want sprawl, or do you want our municipalities to be centered around where our homes are going to be? I am pleased that we're moving forward with maps, but I also see a lot of work that we need to do on our maps before third reading. We need to make sure that they reflect the zones that are going to most make sense for our county, and then we need to make sure that the density we allow. I'm very pleased that we're talking about open space, which are developments. I encourage you to look at the Patrick Square development that's inside of Clemson for the concept that some houses can be closer together in one part of a development so that there are large, open, protected places in the other parts of the development. Generally, these look better and they're better for our land, and that's what we're working toward. We currently have no kinds of those codes. The first thing that the chairman said when he read this is to limit conventional subdivisions to 10 lots. Should we pass that, we have immediately stopped the giant clear cutting and putting in of hundreds of homes, which is what this all started with in January when you were all up here saying, please stop that. This UDSO is very close to stopping that, and that is pleasing. We're now in the weeds of making sure that the density and the maps we develop reflect where the people can go. So I look forward to voting for these 12 items to get through second reading. They are not final. They will definitely be edited before third, but I also look forward to this next committee meeting that the vice chair requested, because I think our map still needs work and our public needs to see how we're discussing staff recommended maps in line with density. Thank you.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Wallace.
You knew I'd have to.
I'm glad you did.
I think there's still a lot of work to be done on this.
main reason I would vote for second reading is so the public can see what's in here, because it's hard to sit up here. Y'all don't know what's up here, and it's not right for us to sit here and hash back and forth. You guys are sitting up there going, the heck are they talking about? Second reading, we'll put it out there. I encourage everybody, look at this, look at it, read it, see what's in it, tell us. We need feedback. Don't just rely on the 6 of us up here to make the decision solely on ours. And we've had good feedback. I'm not saying nobody's given us feedback, but please take the time and read this.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Sir.
Boy, we disagree on the purpose of 3 readings. The result of everything we do should be a combination of what we do and what you want in your input. Now, there should be committee meetings first by the council. They then create a proposal which is close. This first reading in title only is nothing. It shouldn't even be legal. It provides the public nothing. That's the reason for 3 readings, that the public will get the first reading, read about it, learn about it. Then they stand up there, they give us public input. They write letters to the editor, they get on Facebook. They call us, they give us input. We then modify that document, put out a second reading, throw it back out to the public. We get more input, make changes. Third reading should be a final. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Here they make all sorts of motions in third reading. That's amazing to me that happens. Third reading should be pretty much a final product. If you can't get a final product by third reading, you haven't started early enough in the process, and that's what we do. I mean, here we are, second reading. You guys don't know anything about what we've been doing and what we're up to. We solicit all this public input, but when we have documents and things, you know nothing about it. Because honestly, most people up here don't know. It's changing so much and so quickly. We should not even be at first reading yet on this. Once we get the first reading, we hand that to you, and then the process really starts where you give input, and we make adjustments along the way. When you only get a final version at third reading, it's something that's just been hoisted onto you by the council. And that's basically what's happening here. And that's sad. And we weren't even allowed to debate every issue here, with you here, to actually see it.
Do me a favor, Mr. Roper, go back a couple slides. I want to look at the timeline. That's all the times this has been discussed. And we all know that this isn't really all the times this has been discussed. So for the allegation that this hasn't been discussed, this hasn't been to committee, this hasn't been debated, this hasn't been, and that you haven't had an opportunity to debate, it's really insulting, because there's the evidence that you have and we have. Now, we do fundamentally have a differing opinion on the purpose of 3 readings. I also know that the budget gets 3 readings, and every year there has been an amendment at the 3rd reading of the budget. I won't say by who or who does and who don't. I'm just saying that it does happen. So that is an ordinance like anything else. So the allegation that you haven't had a chance to debate, discuss, or that we shouldn't even be here because we haven't discussed it enough, I think that list right there says that we have had some discussion about it. And I want to clarify that, because the last thing I want is for someone to say, yeah, you know, he's right. I haven't heard anything, because that's a list of dates where we can confirm without a shadow of a doubt that this conversation has taken place.
You missed my point. My point is, those are committee meetings should be leading to a first reading where you have a product that's made 80% there.
And that's where we fundamentally disagree.
And that's where we disagree. Now, we don't have a product that I don't think is the key thing is density. We got a new map today. And for some reason we're on second reading. I would imagine most of you don't even know what the new map is. I mean, I looked at it, I called planning about it, but I would imagine most people haven't. And here we are, second reading, it's going to be approved. Impact fees, we don't even know what the fees are, we don't know what the wording is. Not even giving it to the public yet. We don't even have it. And it's going to be second reading. How does the public participate in this process if they don't have anything? Because we're busy fishing around for something, which is fine. That's all good, well and good. But you really should not have a first reading until you're pretty close to maybe 80%. And that's just a difference in philosophy, Chris. It
is, and I'll reflect back on, or reminisce back on our Highway 11 discussion when there was a lot of information out with first reading and second reading, and people got confused on what was draft and what was really in, and then we had the public, this group was upset about this, and it's like, no, that's not even being discussed or considered, because there was a lot of misinformation out there, and I felt like we've done a good job, which is what this list is about, of trying to keep the public informed. And it's also the reason why, you know, it's not a document of council until council says it's a document of council. It's a document of one person. If I say, hey, these are my ideas, Roy, that makes it my ideas, but not council. And that's the reason council as a whole has to vote on the document so that the public can have it. And that's where I fundamentally see the purpose of the 3 readings, which is why we're at second reading tonight and going to go right back to committee following, if it passes, following second reading, is so that we can continue the debate and conversation, get the input from the community on this document. And that's what's important. Other discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Wilson.
The process is different everywhere. The point that you just made, that we've been pretty methodical with this, I think it's important to point out to folks that we passed a moratorium on development, and there's some very specific legal requirements associated with stopping a particular level of development, which started for us at above 50 houses in a neighborhood, which is a ton of investments in our community put on hold while we work on this. And that's, you can do it for 6 months, then you get 1 extension. And once you've done that extension, once you get past that, you open the door for getting sued if you continue to push it down the road. So, just to be blunt, perfection is not on the table. Perfection is not on the table. First of all, it's a political process. Second of all, we're in a hurry. And third, this job has not been done in 20 years or more. So it's a huge level of effort. Some things are going to be wrong, and we're going to have to fix it over time. We even talked about that already with the way the process works. So we're going to have to push some of these things out, and we're going to later. So again, perfection's not on the table. But we're talking about this three levels of readings. Mr. Sater, when you were the chairman on the school board, did you get a perfect, like, rough draft document of everything that you guys put through when you controlled the agenda?
It was close,
on the first
time.
time?
Yeah, sure.
And no changes on the third?
No,
No changes
really
on the
not.
second?
No, I mean, if you look at the school board, you go back to the meetings that I was the chairman, those budgets were pretty much done by the third reading. They had to be, Henry, because the state needed them a week later.
So no changes whatsoever, no revisions, no updates, no efforts. You guys.
No, but you're asking me a question.
No, and I'm
And
asking
he goes off subject, but I'm giving you an answer. You can go back and look at it. That's the way we did it. Because July 1st, the state needed it. We approved it
This is my
late
point,
June.
Mr. Chairman. My point is, the process is imperfect because it's a process associated with people. And when you come into these types of meetings and you start talking about perfection and how you want it, it has to be yours, the thing you have to balance out is there's 6 folks that all have to agree to those decisions. And all 6 of those folks have to participate in the political process equally, right? None of us get it only our way. And when you see, I'm not gonna vote for it because it's not 100% my way, that's when you see somebody that needs to move on to something else, maybe gardening or whatnot. In our case today, right, we're doing what almost every one of these types of boards have to do. We talked to you guys about what we would do for the first reading. They come out with an agenda associated with the direction we're going to go. By the time you get second, you have something slightly workable, and then you work these things down to the line. If we had a full-length schedule of opportunity to do this, this is a year and a half, 2-year project. It's not a 9-month project. It's a couple of years, and maybe you take it section after section over a yearly basis because this kind of stuff overwhelms the ability of the staff to support your daily needs plus do this work. Ken, how many people did you add to your department to rework this total system?
How many people do we have work on this?
How many people did you add to your department to carry this workload in addition to what you're already doing?
We'd need
You didn't add anybody, did you?
well, no, we didn't. We could have used all sorts of hands, but we didn't. We did it with those folks standing back there.
In 9 months. So nobody's gonna get perfection out of this, so they're ideal. It's going to be difficult. And we're gonna need you guys to participate in this process all the way to the dead end.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Infrastructure Ad Hoc Committee report. Dr. Wilson, would you like to do the update on that?
So we have an infrastructure committee that meets, or 3 of us appointed to that particular group. Infrastructure is a lot of stuff. The one thing that we had a recent conversation about was garbage. And if you don't think garbage is important, it's basically the foundation of all society, just like sewer, just like cleaning the water up before you put it back into the rivers. So 2 years ago, when we started having discussions about C&D, we were looking at closing our local landfill. I mean, when you say close it, that's closed, capping it off, and then forever having to ship stuff out of our community to a landfill owned by a different corporate government entity. And so we were looking down the barrel of being a shipping entity. MRR came to town, and MRR said we'd like to build a for-profit, not a government-owned, a for-profit landfill. They're going to operate, under the controls of DHEC, but they're going to operate it for profit. So we had the opportunity over the last 2 years to have a change in command at the landfill, and one of the things that new individual came in without the political hamstring of having to work and manage through the MRR process, and then through a totally different sort of layout of the county council, came in fresh-eyed and looked at it from being a consultant engineer in this arena and said, hey, look, if we started to operate this landfill at the maximum sort of efficiency, we might be able to get 50 more years of activity out of it. He came in and said, you're going to close it and never get it back, or we could start operating efficiently and effectively and get 50 more years out of it. And there was a rule where you can't put another landfill like this within 15 miles. So if you draw a 15-mile circle around the one that we have right now, you pretty much run into landfills. So in other words, Pickens County's never getting another one, except for MRR, which started the licensing process before they put that requirement in. So he put on the table an opportunity for us, and his first idea was buy a shredder so we can start making a bunch of real big things that have a lot of air in them, real tiny and compactable. Paid for it in 6 months, right? Then he said, hey, look, this one's not exactly what you need to grind up tires and mattresses and things like that. And I mean, we got 1,200 mattresses from Central Westland, like in a week, right? 1,200 mattresses, you know how much that takes, and just imagine how easy it is to compact a mattress. So he came back and said, hey, buy another grinder. We don't want to buy a grinder. I mean, to be honest with you, some of us are cheap. All of my Jeeps are 60 years old. He came back and he said, can you do that? And then we paid for that thing. How quick, Steve? The second shredder was paid for when we bought it. So at the time he said, okay, look, we're going to have to go in here through a permit process to keep this landfill open versus closing it. You guys want to keep it open versus closing it? We said, that sounds great. Go look at it. And in the meantime, he'd asked us for some other equipment, some heavier duty equipment built for the landfill, built for using a landfill. If you can imagine pushing around garbage with metal and all these things in it versus pushing around dirt, totally different type of equipment, right? So he said we need to compact it more densely so we can take up less space, and then we need the ability to move equipment around without having breakdowns, etc. So he asked for a good bit of equipment. Some of us were cautious about the equipment. We wanted to know if the permit was going to work out because there's some hoops to jump. So he's addressed the issues associated with the permitting, and has come back with a request for us to make a minor requirement asked for by DHEC, and he's also come back and said, okay, now it's time to buy that equipment so that we can start keeping the airspace. And think about airspace. When you fill it up, there ain't no air in it, right? So you're keeping airspace. You're operating efficiently so that you maximize the ability to keep layering things into the landfill over time. And to be honest, he asked for some very expensive equipment. So there's two motions that came from our committee. The first motion that came from our committee was to make an edit to the solid waste program for the county. And basically there was one sentence in there, other than some minor edits like who changed jobs or whatnot, or who's in the job now versus before. There was one line in there that because of response to MRR at some point around 2017 or 18, I believe, the council made added a line that basically said you couldn't make changes to a landfill. So DHEC took offense to that because we're clearly going to make changes to the landfill. So Steve was gracious enough to add an updated sentence in there so that we'd be in compliance. And it was unanimous between Ms. Linville, Mr. Lawless, and myself to put that in front of the board. And then the second piece was for the equipment we talked about earlier. And he's asked for a significant amount of money to be spent on equipment. A Caterpillar, that's $1 million, and it's paid for in 3.5 years. And coming from an industrial environment, I want ROI in an industrial for-profit environment where you're going quarter by quarter to be about 18 months generally, right? 2 years at the max. But in a government environment where you're going to probably hold that asset for 20 more years, and you're not working in a quarter by quarter environment, he's talking about 3.5 years paying for $1 million piece of equipment, and then we're going to use it for 20 to 25 more years. I mean, we get our money's worth out of our equipment out there, even the stuff that's been lighter weight than we really needed. The second thing was for a compactor. So you just imagine the big thing with the studded wheels on it that drives out and back and squeezes all the air out of this material they're putting into the landfill. He's asked for us to spend $936,000 for that piece, and just based on the fact that we won't have to ship stuff to another landfill somewhere else, the shipping costs associated with that, the tipping fees that we would get, here in the county, we're talking about paying for that in 5 years. So then you get 20 more years or so of use for free at our landfill that's gonna last 50 more years. So the return on investment is extensive. The asset associated with what he's proposing that we're going to manage and keep for 50 years is irreplaceable. So we've asked Steve over time from our committee to jump through a significant number of hoops, but at the end of the day, I would propose that we approve these two requests from Steve.
So coming as a recommendation for the committee, it doesn't require a motion or a second. Any discussion on the motion to approve the solid waste management plan? Ms. Lemon.
Dr. Wilson gave a very detailed explanation. I was going to go for the very simplified. The solid waste management plan, we already voted to piggyback the landfill. DHEC was about to approve it and then said, wait, you have one sentence in your solid waste management plan that prevents you from carrying that out. The approval of the solid waste management plan our committee is asking simply corrects that one sentence. So DHEC says yes, so that we can do what we already voted for, which was to piggyback on the landfill. So it's really fixing one sentence. So that's the solid waste management plan. That's why we're voting on it, is over that one sentence, which is highlighted in red on page 19.
Any other discussion on the solid waste management plan? Councilman Wallace.
In the original meeting, I was opposed to buying the equipment. Thankfully, I got on this committee, went out on site with Steve. He explained a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna put you on the spot if you don't mind. The compactor. How much more did you say this new compactor will mash?
So currently with the shredded material and the Bowman dirt compactor that we're using on landfill, we're getting about 3,000 pounds per cubic foot. With this 90,000 pound machine that's made for what we're doing, we're gonna be about 4,000 to 4,500 pounds per cubic foot, which is about 3 times more compacted effort than what we're getting with anything that we've ever had in our landfill.
After going there and talking to you and seeing what you were really talking about, and I'm stingy, I'll tell you I'm stingy. I think that's a huge amount of money for equipment, but I do see the need for it.
Frugal.
Question.
Stingy.
Are we voting on these one at a time?
One at a time.
Okay, then I'll ask my question on the second.
Any other discussion on the solid waste management plan?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Sager.
I think Steve Raines is doing a great job. I mean, solid waste was way behind, and we had a special committee for that, and we did a variety of things. You can see it on the front end. You can see we got recycling back, those blue bins. At 5 recycle stations, you now have 2 attendants working there, and we brought those back. Got a lot of new blue bins, a baler for plastics. This is close to $1 million machine, 2 shredders. I supported all that. I supported it. But on this one, I have to tell you, I just, making this change, going from when the landfill was gonna be closed to we're actually gonna expand it, and spending millions of dollars to do that, I can't support that at this time. I think the council should wait to see the fate of what's gonna happen with MRR and that landfill, whether or not they're gonna meet the obligations of that very stiff agreement. So I would want to wait and see, because in the back of my mind, I would like to buy that landfill rather than try to resurrect this one.
Other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of updating the solid waste management plan, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? And then the motion to approve moving allocation funds from fund balance to purchase 1 compactor and 1 dozer for $1.976540.15 for the solid waste department. Do I have discussion there? Vice Chair.
So, yeah, Dr. Wilson, I didn't catch it fast enough. So the return on the investment is by when? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
One of them is for 5 years and one of them is 3.5 years. So
5 years total?
3.5 on the dozer.
That's right. So in 5 years, we will have made our money back based on what we would have to do in tipping fees.
That's right.
And it gains us between 15 and 40 more years of being able to use our current space.
And we may be farther away than that on
pie in the sky on whether we can do MRR property or they can sell it to whoever they want to.
So to give the, I gave the as long-winded a briefing as I could a second ago, and I apologize for that. But to get to the brass knuckles of it, MRR is an unknown. And then if it doesn't get built and we have to build it, that's an unknown. Right now, we've got this thing, right? I'd rather put a patch on my pants today and wear them for another 20 years than hope my mama buys me pants next month. So at the end of the day, the opportunity here is an irreplaceable asset to be preserved for up to 50 more years. The purchase of the equipment, which will pay for itself in a fraction of the percentage of total time. It's a no-brainer. It's easy. Linking it to the MRR discussion, it's a for-profit enterprise. So for-profit doesn't necessarily mean that if they do build it, they're going to build what we would want to be responsible for, right? And for-profit doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to operate in the way we're talking about operating. So if it's for-profit and they do open and they do sell it, those folks operate it like people normally operate a landfill, the way that we operated our landfill for a long time. The landfill, particularly if they focus on the most profitable market, which is going to be like construction waste, things like that, debris, then you're talking about maybe that thing's running for 12 to 15 years. So even if we did hitch our ride to it, like Mr. Seda said, because somebody 15 years ago made the decision to help them build a landfill, it may not be there but for 15 years, which puts us back into trucking it somewhere else because we won't have a landfill. So how many of you guys want to be burning garbage in your backyard? Not many, right? Well, I would rather we also not have to truck this stuff all over Twin Chimneys. So let me just ask you just one question. Population in the South grows the way that it has been. Population in our region grows the way it has been. And Twin Chimneys starts to get full. Who do you think they're going to want coming in there? Their people or our people? Their garbage or our garbage? Pretty straightforward. If you've got an asset of this large, this critical, and you can make which is a reasonably large investment, you do it. And this is the argument for why we have reasonable property taxes, so that we have the money built up in our general fund when it comes time to make these big purchases, instead of having to do like most folks would have you do, is come back to you for a bond assessment, raise your taxes every time we need to buy a piece of equipment. We've already paid for this one. It's in the bank. So we're going to get decades of return on this modest requirement for something that's absolutely critical for life, right? Or we can't, because we can, we want to be mad about something somebody said they'd do 15 years ago. It's easy. It's a no-brainer.
Councilman Wallace, I do want to say thank you for the perspective, because I remember that great debate discussion, and I was actually kind of right there with you. So I do appreciate that perspective on this equipment and the importance of it. Other discussion on the equipment?
I just want to respond to the MRR thing. MRR is building that landfill, and
So, Councilman Seda, can you please tie it back into
well,
purchasing the
because
equipment?
he mentioned the MRR thing.
But
I mentioned
please-
because you mentioned it. I was just clarifying for the group.
For the point of order, the debate on the table is whether or not to buy equipment. Feel free to mention it if you can tie it back to the buying of the equipment.
All right, if you read the letters in Mr. Raines, he ties the equipment to expanding the life of the current landfill. I think there's another option that I would like to consider, or at least leave open before we continue to move down this path. That's the MRR landfill. We don't know what's gonna happen with it. Is that close enough?
Perfect.
Okay, we're funding the MRR to build that landfill and get it operational. They have to get it operational a period of time. If they don't sell in a certain period of time, they get fined incredibly. If there's no buyers for it, they may be interested in selling it to us versus paying tons of penalties to us.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Now,
Are we funding it? Are we funding that? Or do we provide them a loan so that they can
Yes.
self-fund it and pay us back? Because it's a loan.
It's a loan.
Because that's different than funding it.
No.
No, it's categorically
So
completely different than funding.
Dr. Wilson, please let Councilman Seda finish.
We're funding with an interest-free loan, which if we would have asked them for an interest-free loan, they would have laughed us out of the room. So my point is, until the MRR thing gets settled, I would be more cautious about moving forward with this landfill and putting more money into it and more effort. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Councilman Seda. Any other discussion on purchasing this equipment for the landfill? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Item 6 on tonight's agenda is council correspondence. Committee of the whole meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 20th at 6 o'clock in the main conference room of the admin building. Our next council meeting will be held on Monday, December 4th at 6:30 in the council chambers of the admin building. Are there any other correspondence that need to be announced tonight?
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman.
I'm happy to announce that the principal from each of the high schools received a letter from the Saucon Association of Counties to announce its annual presidential scholarship program to award a $2,500 scholarship
excuse me, on an annual basis to a graduating high school senior who is resident of the same county as the SAC president. So we're very fortunate that they get to apply, so I'm just making this as a notice that they've got the letter and their application forms at the school guidance office. Scholarship application may also be submitted online via the sccounties.org, SCAC scholarships. And it's due by February 1st.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other correspondence that need to be announced?
Chairman,
Ms. Linville.
just want to invite everyone on Friday, November 10th at 5:30 at Gateway Park in Clemson is the official ribbon cutting of the Green Crescent Trail. The Green Crescent Trail is a long-running project taking place in Clemson to add a trail. Doodle Trail and some of the other trails around here already had a railroad line to take over. Clemson is kind of cutting it out, but it's a lot of money that came from the state, from GPATs, and from, I believe, some council money as well, and at some point. And the official ribbon cutting is Friday at 5:30 in Gateway Park at Clemson.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other correspondence? Hearing none, item 7 is motion period new business. Does any members have a motion to make at this time? Hearing none, item 8 on tonight's agenda is ordinances for first reading and/or resolutions. The first asks for a motion to consider resolution 2023-30 and recognition of Family Court Awareness Month. Do I have a motion and a second?
Motion.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? The second is listed as information regarding Pickens County Veterans Celebration Day on Sunday, November 12th, and a resolution. Can I have a motion and a second? Have a motion, can I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, could you read the resolution so that people know what's going on?
Absolutely. A resolution in honor of Veterans Day and to encourage participation in the Pickens County Veterans Day celebration. Whereas Veterans Day is celebrated annually on the 11th day of the 11th month as a date set aside to honor the service and sacrifice of the men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces, and whereas Pickens County has a rich history of men and women who have selflessly served in the United States Armed Forces, and whereas it is our duty as a grateful county to provide support and care for our veterans, raise awareness about the challenges veterans may face, and promote programs and initiatives aimed at improving their quality of life, and whereas the Pickens County Veterans Affairs Office works diligently year-round to ensure veterans are connected to the resources and services to which they are entitled, and whereas the observance of Veterans Day allows us to express our deep gratitude and appreciation for the sacrifices made by veterans and their families during times of both war and peace. Now therefore it be resolved that Pickens County Council does hereby recognize Veterans Day weekend as an opportunity to honor and express our deep appreciation for veterans as a community and encourage citizens to participate in the Veterans Day celebration, including an appreciation dinner for veterans that will be held Saturday, November 11th from 4 to 6 at Golden Creek Baptist Church, and a Veterans Day parade at 3 o'clock in downtown Liberty, and a patriotic show at 4:30 in the Pickens County Performing Arts Center. Is there any other discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand, and that is unanimous. Item 9 on tonight's agenda, second reading of an ordinance delaying the implementation of the 2024 reassessment process in order to benefit the taxpayers of Pickens County and matters related to thereto. Do I have a motion and a second for this second reading?
Motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Say.
The way the reassessment law works is this: when the value of homes are reassessed higher, the cities, the county, the school board, they have to lower the millage rate proportionally so the government does not collect extra revenue due to higher values. Not allowed to do that. Reassessment is not a tax hike, so delaying a year is not tax relief. In the past, when revenue collected, Now, in the past, while the revenue collector would always balance out because of that law, there could be big winners and losers under the old reassessment law. But once they put a 15% cap on reassessed values and how much they could go up, most of those winners and losers, that dynamic went away. So let me just give you a real life example. The last 5 years, values have gone up 89% on average. Because of the cap, most all the reassessments are gonna go up 15%. You could be up 90%, you're only gonna go up 15%. You could be up 40%, you're gonna go up only 15%. So the rate's gonna roll back about 15%. It's gonna be a wash for most people. There will be small instances where some people will pay a little bit more, but there's an offset. Some people will pay a little bit less. So if you delay reassessment a year, those who pay more, this is the small amount, they're gonna have a benefit. But those who are gonna pay less after reassessment, you're gonna take that benefit away from them, push it out of here. So it's a wash. And you guys are gonna get mad about this, but this is why I don't want, one of the other reasons I don't want to vote on this is, and I've said this before, 4 of us have to run for re-election in next June. These reassessment notices come out 5 or 6 weeks before. Now, people will get mad at that. They see that they're up 15%. They don't know that they're going to roll back the rate 15%. It's going to be a wash, but they're going to see that go up. And it's going to create a little problems in that election, which I have to run it. But it's just the way the cards fall with the election cycle. And I think, I don't want people to get the impression that this is being done to avoid the election. Because in 2018, it was a reassessment year. And the council voted to, a reassessment year. It was also an election year. And they pushed it to 2019. I don't support that. And I think it looks like a political decision. I'm going to be voting no. I think we should have the reassessment next year. And I want to make it clear to the public that I'm not part of this.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman.
So, Councilman Said, I disagree with you on all fronts. The people that it's going to help in a reassessment year, 15%, let's say it amounts to $50. If that's all the 15% amounts to, that's $50 that somebody on a fixed income could be able to take advantage of. In a time where interest rates are so high, in a time when the economic turmoil is all around us, if we can push this back and help those people for that amount of time, then I'm all for it. And I take offense at it being you're making a political choice to vote against it so that you don't look like you're doing something for politics. I don't care about the politics of it. All I care about is how can we help the people on fixed income. And if we have a chance to do that through reassessment and those folks not have to pay $10, $20, $50 more a year, I don't know why we wouldn't do that. So yes, it falls on an election year. Didn't choose that, didn't pick it. I don't know why we wouldn't really do this every time to push it back and at least give those people who are living paycheck to paycheck and wondering how they're going to make ends meet. And Dr. Wilson pointed out this is a very poor area that we live in. Why not give them that advantage? So I'm voting for it.
Other discussion? Councilman Wallace.
I had, in previous discussions on this, I hear what you're saying about pushing it out a year. I don't think people are gonna save the money to be able to pay their taxes in a year. But I would, and I brought this up, I would like to see a reasonable millage reduction to drop people's taxes. I know we can't do it with this budget year because it's already done. But I would like for us to discuss that if we're really wanting to help people.
Mr. Chairman, amen.
Vice Chairman.
That's all. It was amen.
Okay. Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Sager.
if somebody's paying $50 more, somebody's going to be paying $50 less, or 2 people are going to pay $25 less. That's how reassessment works. If you put it off a year, those that are going to pay $50 more in the reassessment, they're going to get a benefit. But the ones that are going to pay less in reassessment, that benefit's going to get pushed off a year. So it's kind of a wash when you look at the numbers. And I do agree with Chris. I think if we were really looking to benefit everybody, rather than benefit those that are gonna pay a little bit more and harm those that are gonna pay less. We should cut the millage, about 2 or 3 mils. I mean, revenue's very strong, we have a lot of savings. Now, if we really want to, help the public with inflation and things like that, we would cut taxes so that all would benefit. So he makes a good point.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman.
Mr. Roper, can you explain to me how, if it's $50 one way, somebody else is gonna pay $50 more?
Less.
I thought it's based on your property value.
Yeah, it's based on the property value. It's also in an aggregate. So you're talking about the county budget as a whole. We can't realize more revenue because of a reassessment. But when you get to it's very hard, even for the wisest amongst us, to see all ends. And to see all ends, particularly when it comes to individual taxpayers. And so we know that in the period of growth that we've had in property values, that people are gonna be hitting that 15% cap. There's no question about that. Now, what's gonna ultimately happen with the adjustment that happens at the end of the process and those that might not hit the 15, again, it's hard to see all ends, but it will certainly be an uncertain time. And there will certainly be people that will be losers in this process. And so I'm not trying to enter into the political debate, I don't want to. But I would say that we have to be careful that we're not too cavalier with those that might be looking at a higher tax because of this. And the fact that they could have another year where they don't have that is something that I know staff was very, very forward-thinking on.
So basically you're saying, so if somebody's property value went down and we kept it and it stayed up, that they would be paying, we're keeping that too high?
If the property value went down?
Yeah.
I don't think that's happened.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out.
So truthfully, if I understand correctly, sitting here listening to this debate, if I live in a property that has been improved, or I live in an old family property that the value has gone up just because it's gone up, I am going to go up 15% regardless, because that's the cap. Because we're growing, I mean, the values grow, especially on improved property. If I bought it for $50,000 and it really with minimal work was worth 75, I hit that 15% without trying. Where if I bought a brand new house, or I bought a house that someone else improved, mine's not gonna go up 15% because that was assessed on me when I purchased that home. So that person may actually see the $50 decrease. That person in the new construction, that person in the newly purchased house may see the $50 decrease, because me, who is living in the family home or the improved home, I'm gonna get the $50 increase. And that's the wash you're talking about.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're right about that. It's also, when you're talking about the aggregate number, that's where the adjustment has to happen. That's the millage calculation has to happen. The way that applies to individual folks, particularly in situations where perhaps, what we're not talking about here is we are talking about the increase in general property values, but what about depreciation on a specific residence? What about that? So it's not gonna be zero sum in the sense that, oh, you got 25, I got 25 less. There's going to be winners and losers. There's no way around that. And so when you're looking at that, staff's thought was that kind of uncertainty in this economic time is a good year to put it off a year.
Mr. Chairman. Dr. Wilson.
I'm sensitive to doing this specifically because we just came out of a very unique economic climate. We've forestalled some decisions last year. We made some decisions about self-insuring, hoping that we would have a more stable economic market, right? We have had an incredible spike in real estate values. Last time the economy reset, or it changed significantly, has the values changed? They went down. And so for my purposes, stabilization of the overall economic climate would be nice to see, because if there is a relaxation in total inflation on just housing values, that would be great. And if there's just a sense that it may be more fair to folks if we reassess after that relaxation versus now, I'm sensitive to vote for this.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Lincoln.
At the South Carolina Association of Counties meeting, I asked about this, why this rule exists. Like, why would the state have a law where you have to do this every 5 years, but the county can just request to collect it over 4 years instead? Like, it seems like they wrote in a loophole, and the county's people said, yeah, they did. Most counties use this when they are understaffed and they can't complete an assessment in time. Several counties used it during COVID because they could not get onto people's properties. One county did it recently because they had a software update that messed up their ability to do it. So the state gives a ton of leeway. I don't have passion for or against this. I mean, your taxes are gonna come due. You're gonna get reassessed. Almost all of us are gonna see an increase. It's going to happen. Go ahead and start saving. It is going to hit you. Taking a year off will help some people, I recognize that. But to me, it's almost like the state left us a loophole. If we want to take advantage of the loophole, there seems to be no penalty for it. I mean, I just think it's an interesting state law that you're allowed to do, you have to do the work every 5 years, but you only have to collect it every 4 years.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Sam.
let me explain when your taxes will go down in reassessment. Your value of most people goes up 15%. To make it revenue neutral, the rate will come down 15%. It's wash. Now, your house only goes up 12%. The rate's coming down 15%. You're gonna get a cut. So, when everybody's going up 15%, and that's forcing the rollback of 15%, if you happen to be an outlier and only go up 12%, which you're not, probably 0 properties that go up 12% when the average is going up 89%. But that one, when your property only goes up 12 or 13% and they roll back 15%, that's when you'll get a cut. So my point is, those people that are gonna get that small benefit, they're not gonna get it next year because we're putting it off a year. So I made that point a couple of times, but that shows you who would get the cut. If your property doesn't go up the 15%, you're gonna get a benefit.
Other
It's not gonna
discussion?
hurt you.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Item 10 on tonight's agenda is ordinances for third reading, and we have none. Item 11 on tonight's agenda is other requested agenda items. I do have a request for appointment to the Anderson Area Transportation Study, also known as ANATS. Since this does encompass the Clemson Council District, I've asked Ms. Linville if she would please represent council on that committee. South Carolina update on state infrastructure bank funding and application, Mr. Roper.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll take just a couple of moments to talk about this because I know that y'all been hard at work tonight and the public's been very patient with this. But I do want to make sure that we're communicating this on multiple avenues, and we also have a follow-up discussion I would like, if council deems appropriate, for us to talk about in terms of contractual aspects of this, that we could have a discussion in executive session following this meeting. But talking about 183, again, many of you have seen where Pickens County, through our delegation, through the work of county staff, through the work of this county's council, and the leadership of this county council, we've been able to secure $95.2 million to improve South Carolina Highway 183. To make sure that the public understands, this is for widening and safety improvements, basically from White Horse Road in Greenville across the bridge of the Saluda and then all the way several miles into South Carolina 135, basically the Dakesville Highway crossing. So that's the most trafficked part of this road. That's the part of this road that is clearly well above the capacity that as it currently exists. We believe, in looking at it, this is also part of the reason we see a lot of traffic on 123 is because people try to avoid 183. I will tell you from my own standpoint, we see traffic on 11 because people are trying to avoid 183 as well. So that's the scope of the project. We've talked about the funding before, $95.2 million in funding, and I just want to make sure that the public understands where this is coming from. 44.7 million of that, almost half the money, is coming from the State Transportation Infrastructure Bank for the first time in Pickens County history. They've made an award to Pickens County. This has always gone to other counties, and Pickens County hadn't gotten their share. So that State Transportation Infrastructure Bank money of 44.7. To get that, we also had to have 28 million come from GPATS. And GPATS, that's basically the way that federal road money comes to our local communities. So that's federal money coming in there. And then 22.5 million is what we had to have of a local match. Of that 22.5, our members of our delegation through the Pickens United program were able to get 10 million from the South Carolina General Assembly, so that's state money coming to us. Then 9.75, about 43% of that smaller pie came to us from the County Transportation Committee, which is not the county, it's the state gas tax. So that's a way that we're capturing that state gas tax and putting it towards the state road. Of the smaller portion of the pie, of the 24%, 12% is coming from county millage. And I think the point that I want to make for tonight is that county millage portion, that 12%, was not a tax increase. That was not a tax increase. That was something that this council was able to find in the existing budget from last year. Growth in the value of the mill they were able to dedicate towards this. Basically 3/10 of a mill. So the story that I'll make sure everyone understands is these improvements to South Carolina 183 are being paid through federal monies, state gas tax, state infrastructure money, special allocation from the General Assembly, and 1/3 of a county mill that we were able to find by looking at ourselves in the mirror and really testing our assumptions. Let's find that mill. Let's just don't come up with a new way to spend money. Let's find that 1/3 of a mill. A graphical way, I'm not a mathematician, but 12% of 24% is probably what? Gentlemen, ladies, 3%? I don't know, it's in that neighborhood. So a graphical way to think of that is there's 50 chairs in this room that y'all all are sitting in. 50 chairs. Each chair is $2 million. That chair is the only one that's county millage. That one. I was going to say Ms. Raines' chair, but she left. She forgot to pick up her book request objection form, but anyway, that's not relevant right now. But it's that chair is the only one that's coming from the county mill. The rest of the stuff is money we were able to leverage with that 1/3 of a county mill. I think that's a good thing, and I think it's a point that needs to be made. We appreciate council voting for that budget, authorizing that bond issue, providing that vision, and giving us that guidance. What happens now? This is the real point for tonight. What happens now? Basically, 3 entities are going to have to enter into a contract negotiation. SCDOT is going to have to agree that this road get improved. Pickens County is going to have to agree to its role in making that happen. And the State Transportation Infrastructure Bank, who is the goal, it's oddly the most money, it's also the golden circle. That was an accident, but they're the golden circle. They're going to have to provide a lion's share of that funding. So that's what's going to happen now. There's a couple of procedural hurdles that have to happen this winter for the Department of Transportation to approve and the Joint Bond Review Committee to approve. I've been assured those are perfunctory approvals that we expect since we've gotten the money, that there won't be any issue there. Don't anticipate any issue. And then we will have to negotiate that contract. And we'll be counting on our county attorney to help us with that negotiation to see how we move forward. But what should the public look for next? The public should look for a series of public meetings happening after the first of the year. We're going to want, as Pickens County being one of the 3 partners in this project, we're going to want to know the public's input on how this road needs to be widened, what safety improvements would you like to see, and how would you like to see them implemented. Again, we need to do these improvements. We know we do because of the existing traffic on this road. The road can't handle that, and so we're ready for that. And then the next thing you'll see after some significant public input on it, you should start in the first quarter into the spring, start seeing survey crews out there working. That's our plan, is we're going to move forward as expeditiously as possible. We know that but for this funding, South Carolina Department of Transportation told me specifically we were not on their 10-year window. This was not going to happen in this 10-year window. We don't know when it would be in a 10-year window, but now with this money in place, let's push forward where we can. So we ask the public's continued passion for this project. We ask for their input on this project when we go into the public meetings here in the new year, and then we also ask for them to look for the workers out on the road doing the surveying, the engineering, and try to operate safely and give them grace when you see them. And again, there's another portion that I'd like to talk about in executive session because it's related to proposed contractual, and I would like to get your guidance on. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Roper on that? Alder Wilson.
It's $95 million. It's an important project. We bought land when I was in 10th grade on Highway 183, and we went up there. We took our golden retriever, and she ran right out on the road the first day and was ran over by like a Japanese model sports car that had been really, really improved. And the kid felt so terrible for my mom that he just packed all the little pieces that broke off of his car into it and drove off. And I've wanted to fix this road ever since. And so many folks live on that road that have so many stories like that. If you talk to EMS folks, if you talk to people that live on the road, it needs to be fixed. And I just want to tell you how deeply I appreciate the fact that, I mean, you guys all stepped up and are gonna help us fix it. I mean, it's a long road to go. It's a long ways to go. And, you know, there's discussion about doing the engineering piece for not more than just that one segment in case there's opportunity for us to get other funding to fix more of the road. But $95 million doesn't go nearly as far as it used to. So for my purposes, there is some urgency for us to push this thing as fast as possible, because at 15% construction inflation, the $15 million ain't gonna be much at all in 7 to 10 years. So I appreciate everything you guys have done, and I also appreciate you guys are committed to putting horsepower behind making this work out. It means a lot to everybody that lives in that area, and on their behalf, I truly appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Item 12 on tonight is the consent agenda. We have council Facebook page to the committee of the whole, and then tonight we put the UDSO back on the log committee of the whole. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Motion.
Have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
What is the council Facebook page?
So it's a topic that has been asked to be added to the committee log to discuss. I believe it came out of a workshop and looking at opportunities around communication with our constituents and the general population of our county. Is that a fair assessment? Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That is unanimous. Item 13 is executive session, and we have one item. I ask for a motion and a second that we go to executive session for proposed contractual matter regarding agenda item 11C. Do I have a motion and a second that we go to executive for this item and this item only?
Motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Council Lawless.
Mr. Chairman, that's 11B.
11B, my apologies, thank you.
So,
Would you recount your motion?
Yeah. Motion to go for
11B. Second? Second. Thank you.
So my question is so boards and appointments to boards and commissions, that's not happening tonight, is it?
Oh, that is not happening tonight.
Okay.
Other discussion? All those in favor of going to executive session for this item only, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. We'll adjourn to executive, and we'll be back to finish out our agenda in a few.
If I take one of these, are you gonna publicly chastise me?